Good morning, everyone, or whatever time it is of day where you are located in the world. My name is Lucy Gray, and it is 6 in the morning in Chicago, where I live in the middle of the United States. And I'm really pleased to introduce to you today one of my new colleagues from work with the Charter for Compassion. The Charter for Compassion is an organization that brings people and other organizations together to do compassionate work. And Anum Mulla, if I'm pronouncing her name right, because I'm always terrible with names, is our youth strategist and just a powerhouse of information and connecting and compassion. So I'm very excited to bring her to you today to talk about the work that's been going on at the Charter, particularly around youth. And hopefully you'll want to connect with her and get involved. So Anam, thank you for being here today. I'm going to turn it over to you and break a leg, as we say, in the business here in the United States. Okay? Have a good presentation. I'll be here in the background.
Thank you so much, Lucy. Thank you. And I'd like to send everybody warm greetings for wherever you are in the world, because it might be just a tiny bit cold where you are and maybe warm in some places. So thank you so much, Lucy, for that wonderful introduction. As Lucy said, my name is Anum Mulla, and I live in New Delhi, India. So I know that it's the second half of the day for me, but it's very early morning for Lucy and our friends in the United States. So as Lucy mentioned, I am the Charter for Compassion's Global Youth Strategist, and I also have the deep privilege of serving on the Charter's Board of Trustees. And I would just like to start off by saying how truly wonderful it has been to be a part of GLOW this year. And I would like to take a quick moment and extend my deepest gratitude to Lucy, as well as to anybody else. And I know there has been a wonderful team of volunteers behind her who have helped set up this conference. It has been so inspiring to sit in for all of these transformational dialogues yesterday. And I'm very excited for day 2. And I'm not going to lie, I'm a little spoiled for choice, given that there are so many wonderful offerings. So I'm thrilled to know that we're using this platform, which supports replay and recordings, because I know that I'm going to be going back and doing just that. So while I've been reflecting on, what to really present on today with this interesting and very loaded topic, might I add, of cultivating compassion, which I truly believe, and I know my friends at the Charter, including Lucy, believe is truly the future of education. I've been sitting here, writing different thoughts and wondering what would be the best approach to bring all of this insightful information to you. And I have to say, yesterday, while I sat in for some of the sessions for GLOW, a little bit of that it was just so nice to be able to see that alignment in some of the keynotes that were taking place, as well as some of the conversations happening in the session rooms. And I bring this up because I think for me, what really struck a chord yesterday, and I'm certain will today as well with the programming that unfolds, is the fact that whether you are an informal educator or a formal educator, or even just somebody interested in education, I think what unites all of us is this deep desire and motivation to impart not only knowledge, but wisdom to those who would like to seek it, whether those are our students or the younger generation that we are helping to facilitate a path forward to some kind of change. It's just so inspiring to be in a space, even though it is virtual, but we can feel the presence of these wonderful educators across the world, bringing to light their different aha moments and their key takeaways from what is happening in their communities and their schools and their universities. And I feel deeply privileged to be among them and share the stage. So as you can see from the title of my presentation, I'm going to be speaking about perhaps not just cultivating compassion, but I'd like to focus my presentation more on why it is important to do so. And I think before I do that, it would be interesting to hear about my journey to this space. So I promise not to take too much time for that because I'd love to get into some key details here. But I would be remiss not to mention my journey with the wonderful Charter for Compassion for many reasons. But of course, one of them being it is the place where I crossed paths with the lovely Lucy Gray. So I was a writer for many years, and I don't know if I can still hold that title because I haven't written anything in a long time that hasn't been for work. But after I left the field of writing, I started exploring this idea of compassion from a very spiritual place. And what I came across was many different studies that are online, and I'd be happy to share them with those that are interested, or perhaps I can just post them in the main chat. But what struck me most is this idea of neuroscience when it comes to compassion. And what I found through all of my readings, and I must say I am still a student of understanding how neuroscience works when it comes to things like empathy and compassion. And what I found through these readings is that our innate virtues of empathy and compassion are biologically and inherently wired into our human disposition. And that is perhaps what inspired me the most to be able to dig just a little deeper on that thought. And it was through a lot of different research portals that I kept seeing the Charter for Compassion pop up. And I reached out to the executive director, who is still our executive director today, Miss Marilyn Turkovich, and got into a dialogue about taking different courses on how to truly understand what compassion means in our world and the potential it has to change the way we behave, not only within ourselves, but for others. And after a number of courses, I found myself on a path of becoming an empathy and compassion skill facilitator. And of course, my relationship with the charter continued to grow. And, there are a number of different avenues that we collaborated on together and explored. And I was then nominated and voted onto the board of trustees. And I found myself in this wonderful position of global youth strategist. And I mention all of this because I would like to give a real world example of how it is not only possible, but there is a large network of compassion-based organizations, not just in education, but in all sorts of what we call compassionate action in the world. So, and I'm going to drop in the Charter for Compassion website on the chat here just when I'm done. But the Charter actually works in 12 different sectors, and education is a key sector that we work in, and it seems the most pertinent to mention in this conference. But through our findings in the Charter for Compassion, what we have seen is that there are many different organizations and educational institutes that implement and embrace this idea of compassion-based education. And I'm going to just go ahead and flip through my slide to get just a little deeper into why we even want to explore compassion when it comes to education. Now, before I read out what's on the screen, I would like to acknowledge the fact that, and I'm not sure if any of you have felt this way in the past, but I have often been told that compassion is just kindness or softness, or it's just somebody being a little, I hate using this word, but I'm going to use it, but somebody being a little fluffy when it comes to their responses. And as somebody who has been a writer and read many different people's perspectives on what different human emotions feel like, I can completely understand that this is a valid way of thinking about compassion. But when we dig just a little deeper and we back that up with science, what we are able to see is that each human being is born with a sense of empathy and compassion, and we would not be able to exist without it. It is something that is a part of our biological disposition. And when we look at different cases in history, just in terms of our evolution, of how we have been able to survive, those are all acts of somebody feeling empathy towards us. Hearing a child crying, we need to activate empathy in order to understand that that child is in pain. And that is the first step in acting out of compassion, which I know there are many different definitions, and I want to be cognizant of the fact that we are joined by a global audience. So there might be a different definition of compassion in the languages you speak. I know that I'm bilingual, and it would be hard for me to translate what compassion is in one language to another, but hopefully we're all on the same page when we say that compassion is our innate desire or aspiration to alleviate the suffering of another. And when we take that back to the example that I just shared about picking up a child who is in distress, that is a compassionate action because we are doing something that is hopefully our intention. Our intention, hopefully, is to alleviate the suffering of that child. Now, when we look at this from a neuroscientific perspective, there is tons of research out there that shows us that we, as I said, and I know this is something I have repeated and will continue to repeat throughout these wonderful minutes that I have with all of you, it is something that is inherently wired into our human disposition and our consciousness. But we get stuck when we perhaps have different environments that we flourish in, or we pay attention to different skills. And I use the word skills as an introduction to bringing this in an educator context. So when we speak about compassion-based education, we speak about it in terms of cultivating empathy and compassion as skills, which means that we do have them present within us, but how do we go deeper into cultivating them and hopefully being able to present them into our own lives to act in a compassionate way towards others? Now, if we look at the screen here, again, when we think of compassion, we cannot think of compassion without empathy. Empathy is the first step in being able to commit a compassionate act, if I might say so. So when we put compassion into the educator context, what we are hopefully aiming to achieve here is not just empathy, but cover the need for empathy. So given everything that is going on in the world today, and I would be remiss not to mention that we are in the middle of bearing witness to a genocide that is unfolding, to different conflicts that are unfolding. And however much we might want to protect our students or the youth that we are imparting wisdom to, we are not able to do that. That is the reality of the world that we live in. And perhaps that has been the reality of educators who have existed before our time as well. But the fact of the matter is that a divided and stressful world needs solutions rooted in empathy. Moving on to the next point, education, as I'm sure all of you know, because I know I am most likely in a room full of educators here, it doesn't just shape minds, but it shapes hearts. And when we throw empathy and compassion into the mix, what we are hoping to achieve is more of a holistic internal and external development of the youth or the child that we are nurturing through our education tools. And of course, another big area of why compassion is a wonderful tool in the educator perspective is the community strength that comes out of it. So compassion-based education has the power to build stronger individuals and communities. And I'd love to just get a little bit deeper into what exactly compassion-based education is. So I know I've spoken about empathy, I've spoken about compassion, I've spoken about the tools and why I think they're necessary, but I'd like to go in to give you just a few examples of some of the, and I'm going to continue to call them skills, because I think when we approach these human virtues, again, that I argue, and I know science argues, we are inherently wired with, but when we approach them from a skill perspective, we are able to practically cultivate them through different methods of practice, of engagement, through experiential learning. So compassion-based education has a focus on, of course, empathy and kindness, interpersonal and emotional skills, as well as personal and societal growth. And I'm hoping that the text in the slide isn't too tiny, but just in case it is, I'm going to go ahead and read them out. So most compassion-based education programs, and I will be giving us a few examples of them a little ways down the road, but it is safe to say that the ideology and the format behind these education programs, they start with a basic understanding of the self, as you can see. And the idea is to really be able to impart the wisdom and knowledge to self-cultivate different skills. So if you look on the left-hand side of the slide, I've listed just a few, and it's not an exhaustive list because of course there are many different tools and skills to cultivate. But when we look at self-cultivation, we start with a nervous system regulation. Now I know as educators all over the world, this is a very hot topic right now. But again, we go back to where it is based in science. So when we look at the extreme anxiety and depression and different mental health issues that the youth of today, and I know that the work that I am doing gives me a deep insight into not only children who are in schools or older children who are in high schools, but also those who are in universities. This is a global problem, and there has been a lot of data to back the fact that we are in an increased time of mental health issues. And when we look at our nervous system, there is a wonderful scientific explanation in terms of what is happening when our body is dysregulated. Now, as I said earlier, there is a lot of neuroscience when it comes to compassion-based education, and it is certainly not my forte. As you can tell, I chose a career in writing, and clearly after that, in finding compassionate solutions to the world. But when we look at different diagrams that are available on the internet, there is a wonderful representation of the brain, which gives us a very easy tool to be able to explain to those we are imparting our knowledge and wisdom to of how the brain becomes, and I don't know if I'm able to show this very clearly here, but I'll put the resources in the chat. But there is a great tool that you can share just with your hands, which shows you the brain like this. And it explains, what the stem of the brain is, the amygdala, what's happening in our survival brain, and how that is what is responsible for our fight or flight. And in very basic terms, what happens when we are dysregulated, aka feeling anxiety, or perhaps going into a lower zone of depression or sadness, our brain completely switches off because the survival brain loses its connection to the three working parts of the brain. And in order to get ourselves back into what we call a regulated state, or what is often referred to as the zone of well-being or the resilient zone, we need to make the connection to the survival brain. And the only way to do that is through sensation language, which, of course, again, I know is a very hot topic, but that comes down to mindfulness. It comes down to breathing techniques to be able to discern what sensation you are feeling in your body at the time. And there are a number of tools and different techniques that go into how we get back to a regulated state, which I think I could spend the entire session on today. But just to name a few, we have tools like tracking, which is tracking our bodily sensations, resourcing, which is being able to bring to mind a resource, which is a memory or an object, to regulate our nervous system, as well as grounding, the technique of bringing our body into contact with a surface or the ground, or even just the back of our chair, for example. These are very quick examples of how there is most certainly a process of self-cultivating our nervous system regulation. And that is always the first step in compassion-based education, because the idea goes that if we are able to self-cultivate our own states of mind, only then are we able, and you can go back to the circle and see the others aspect, which is our interpersonal skills. And I'm just going to spend a few quick minutes on the rest of the skills that I've mentioned here. So as you can tell, the nervous system regulation is one that always gets me very excited, because there is a lot of science there. And I think that's the best way to be able to relay this, because we know that this is grounded in fact. So self-cultivation can also explore things like ethical discernment and mindfulness, emotional awareness, and very importantly, self-compassion. And there is a lot of data out there. There are wonderful books and textbooks that offer so much literature and material on how one can cultivate these skills. But typically, a compassion-based program will start with the self-cultivation of these kind of skills. And then we move to others or interpersonal. And this is where we introduce concepts of empathy and compassion. And again, if we are able to self-cultivate those skills, we then have a clearer path to be able to discerning an empathic attitude towards others. There's also something here that I want to spend a quick minute just speaking about, and I'd love to hear any reflections in the chat, because this one for me is I think what connects me most when I think of compassion as a skill, and that is common and shared humanity. Now, this is the bedrock of how we interact with others and what our empathy is really asking us to do. So we look at things like our in-groups, our out-groups, the biases that come with that, and how can we really overcome that? It is by recognizing our common humanity, the fact that if for nothing else, what we have in common is our shared human experience. And going back to what I said just a couple of minutes ago now about the worlds that we live in today, this is an extremely pertinent and important skill, because without being able to transcend our in-group bias to our out-group bias, we are not headed for a future of any kind of justice or peace. And these are incredible skills to instill in young minds that we are nurturing, whether that is in primary school, in middle school, in high school, all the way up to universities, and I would argue even the workplace. So when we move from the second circle, the third circle is what really ties it all together, which is a systems perspective. So in compassion-based education programs, once you have ensured a self-cultivation of these skills through regular practice, which includes a lot of contemplative practices, and that is a more fancier way of saying meditative practices. And then we take that to the interpersonal or the other level, we want to end up at a systems perspective level. And why this is important is because, we may be able to expand that circle of concern, as some of the trainings call it, to those in our community, but we want to be able to understand the interdependent nature of the world that we live in. And there are some fantastic activities when it comes to exploring this idea of appreciating interdependence. And again, I know I'm amongst educators, so I'm sure that some of you have already done some of these activities in your classrooms before, or in your institutional and educational settings, but there is a fantastic activity, which I think I do have to spend a quick minute on because it's so powerful, where you ask the students or the group of individuals in a room to pick an object. And let's say I pick a pen, and you ask people to sit there and draw out all the different people that they think made getting this pen to them possible. And now that starts with, let's say that, Lucy gifted me this pen when I had the chance to meet her recently at another conference, which we had a wonderful time attending. So I would write Lucy, and then I would think about it and say, okay, well, where did Lucy go to get the pen? So then I would draw another line and write the shop that she went to. And it ends up giving us so many different lines of understanding of how many people are involved in just this one pen finding its way to me, and how many different countries, because it ends up going to raw materials and sourcing the ink and, the plastic from the pen and the branding. And it's a wonderful activity to be able to show you that even though you might not think that you are connected to everyone in the world, inadvertently you are. And this beautiful idea of interdependence is not just a tool to be able to give us a sense of gratitude for merely existing and being able to exist because of so many strangers around us who are connected to us, but it also helps us understand that our actions, however small or large, have a lasting impact and have the potential to affect others. So It's a wonderful way to kind of take us deeper into a systems perspective. And it also helps us with some of the other skills that are on the screen right now, which is engaging with discernment. So being able to discern and use wisdom and compassion to understand in a system what the different reason might be for a problem, not just looking at something at a surface level. So that interdependence allows us to really go to the root of a problem, as well as a good thing. So there really are two sides to the coin here. Another thing we have up on the screen is epistemic humility, which I'm sure a lot of people here might know, but it's a wonderful concept founded in psychology and philosophy, which tells us that we might not know what the other knows. And that is a simple explanation of promoting the idea that we need to connect both stories to form one. So these are, and I'm cognizant again of the fact that this might be a very quick, narrow down understanding of some of the principles, but these seemed like the ones to mention that are truly inspiring to learn from an educator perspective in terms of imparting it to your students or those that you are in a program with. And when we think of the impact of compassion in education, of course, not just these wonderful skills that we are hopefully unpacking and being able to offer to the minds that we are nourishing, but in a true sense, the academic benefits of compassion-based education really do show higher motivation and performance. So you can imagine if we have students or those that are working with us engaging in mindful practices every day, thinking about their emotional awareness, tuning into self-compassion as an act of not just self-love, but self-healing. And how I can't believe I'm going to say it, but how the youngsters say it today, working on themselves. If that is something that people are consciously doing at the education level, then of course it goes without saying, there will be a benefit in terms of their self-esteem, their self-confidence. And I think we all know here that to be in that state is when you are more motivated to perform better, of course, at best of your capabilities. We also have plenty of social benefits when it comes to integrating compassion-based education into these systems. There are a number of enhanced interpersonal skills that not only I think those that are taking the knowledge, but those that are imparting it gain. Just going back to the interdependence activity or the cultivation of something like empathy or gratitude for the other really helps in terms of not only our communication, but our basic understanding of the world and those beyond us. And of course, there are a number of emotional benefits as well. There is this big talk around resilience in today's day and age, and it is something that, unfortunately or fortunately, we need to put at the forefront of all of our educational efforts, given that the world that we live in, given the different political stories that are unfolding, the uncertainty, the lack for hope in the world, there is an extreme call to action right now, which asks us as ourselves to build that resilience, not just for ourselves, but also for those around us as well as our students. So I truly believe that compassion-based education is the tool to be able to cultivate that resilience. And I know I've been speaking a whole lot about compassion-based education programs, and I could only fit 2 on the screen. I had a lot of technical difficulties getting this slide up, as I was telling you, Lucy, before. There are a number of programs, but I will offer a quick look into 2, and these are both offered by Emory University in the United States. So there is something called the C Learning Program, which is the Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning Program. This is a wonderful curriculum from K through 12, and it is free for educators to go onto their website and download their curriculum. And there is another presenter as well, I think, who is more integrated into the system at Emory, and I believe that he is one of the program heads of the C Learning program, if I'm not mistaken. So do tune into his presentation for more details. But this is a fantastic program, and they have activities like the one I just mentioned about interdependence, as well as different contemplative practices. There are worksheets in there. And this has been a great effort between those at Emory University and the Dalai Lama Foundation. So it has the blessing of the Dalai Lama, and there has been a beautiful effort that has been made, I know personally, for over 10 years to get this program off the ground, and it has proven to be extremely successful. It has been adopted all over the world, and as I said, it is a free program, so educators can go on. Even if you're not an educator, you can go onto the website. I will be sure to put all of the websites I am citing into the chat right after, and you are able to access K through 12 textbooks and implement those in your classroom. There is another program by Emory University, which is CBCT, Cognitively Based Compassion Training. This one has 8 modules, and it's a little more in depth. And I'm not necessarily sure that it is something to be implemented in schools. But the reason I put it up is because this is a fantastic compassion-based program, which if you as an educator take, you are certainly better equipped to be able to impart that knowledge into your schools. However, if you want a direct textbook helping you, aiding you with how to integrate compassion into your classroom, I would opt for the C Learning curriculum. And a few that are not mentioned on the screen, there is a wonderful organization, and I'm not sure if people here are familiar with it, but it's called the Trauma Resource Institute, and they have been the pioneers in leading a lot of data research studies that we continue to quote in a lot of our compassion cultivation trainings. But they have a fantastic program which is called CRM, and that is a community resiliency module. I wanted to put that up on the screen, but my computer and I didn't get along too well today. So I will pop all of those into the chat. But again, these are just examples of some of the compassion-based education trainings that are available, not just to implement in schools, but also to take as individuals ourselves, because I truly believe in that module of, and I'm going to go back just to that circle, which is self, others, and systems. So if we think about this in a zoomed out perspective as well, and we look at it from, just being able to cultivate these skills on our own, there is a wonderful process in which we start to impart and really embody that learning to others around us, not just for ourselves. So it is, I would highly recommend taking these trainings, even if you're not very confident about implementing them into your different learning programs or the institutes where you work, but try it out just to see how it feels for you. And again, if you have any inclination towards reading all of the neuroscientific research that is out there, there are so many research papers that really shed light into how there has been a big shift over the years when I don't know if I'm quoting this correctly, but I believe it was not too long ago when we collectively as a world thought that the brain didn't evolve and grow after a certain period of time. And then, of course, there was research done with deeper materials that we had access to at the time. And it was proven that the brain is always continuously expanding, and, neurons are forming, and there is so much capacity in our own cognitive abilities to be able to learn new skills and implement things like compassion, like empathy back into our lives if we've lost the way, but also just cultivate them as skills. And I'd like to just put out a call to action, which is something that we take pride in at the Charter, and we always uphold ourselves to speak out what we think is the right message into the world and really call people to this call, which I've broken down here into 4 areas that I felt pertinent to this particular conference. So I'd like to start with educators. What we'd really ask you to do is model compassion and advocate for compassion trainings in your educational institutes or in the groups that you work with. There are a number of resources online aside from the ones that I just mentioned. I will also be putting our website and my email into the chat. So if you need any kind of direction in order to just maybe streamline your research a bit, I'd be very happy to help. If there are any students in the audience, everything starts at the grassroots level, and we implore you to take the lead in fostering empathy among your peers. And this is, I must take a minute to applaud the youth of today, and that might come from a biased place because I primarily work with youth, but I think this generation that we are seeing is already so emotionally astute and emotionally awakened. I think we have seen the youth of today get up, take charge, whether that is leading the climate movement, whether that is standing up for what is right, whether that is protesting against the genocide, whether that is simply being able to publish different petitions. We had a wonderful duo of sisters when we hosted our global youth conference from the charter last month, which Lucy was the star of in terms of helping us put up on this very platform. But we had a number of different young individuals really exhibiting the work that they've done. And I must tell you about these two young girls who are all of 14 and 16, and they have been able to garner over 1 million signatures for a palm oil petition against, the palm oil industry. So the recordings are up. You can watch that at a different time. But just really trying to zero in on the efforts that the youth of today are making. So I almost don't know if this is a correct call to action for any students here, because I know that they're already taking the charge. But take the lead in fostering empathy among peers, and I really hope that the ripple effect of that can be seen by the people around you. And for any parents here, we encourage you to support schools adopting compassion-based approaches. We always need support of the community as well. So we implore the communities to invest in programs that prioritize social and emotional growth. And what I would like to end the presentation with, and I do have a few quick closing comments after that, is the vision for the future. If we just step out for 2 minutes and think of the implementation of compassion-based education programs in educational institutes, and even if we don't think about compassion-based education programs, but if we think of the mere skill cultivation of our human virtues of empathy, compassion, interdependence, gratitude, common humanity, these are all subsets of how to take compassionate action into the world. What we are hopefully going to create is not just schools, but our communities as hubs for emotional and social well-being. And what that really does is create not just a movement, but an entire generation of future leaders that have compassion at their core. And I'm certain I can speak on behalf of all of us here, regardless of our political differences, our ethical differences, or our just purely differences in terms of race or gender or age. But there is a desire to leave the world a better place than we found it, or than we added to the problem of creating the mess that perhaps we exist in today. Again, that's a personal opinion, so I'd like to preface that. But what we need is most certainly the cultivation of compassion for not only the youth, but every single human being, to be able to leave the world at a more just, at a more equitable, and definitely at a more peaceful place than it is right now. And the only way to be able, one of the only ways to be able to do that, is integrating things like compassion at an intellectual level, as well as at the heart and mind level. And when we've really achieved that, what we're hoping to end up with or leave behind for the world is a place where education can bridge that divide and continue to foster unity. And again, I know I have said this so many times, but I would like to remind you again that compassion and empathy is something we are born with. Now, whether you believe in the divine or you are not a believer in the divine, or however you think we arrived into this world, this is our human disposition. Our scientific research tells us that that is how each of us arrive into the world. So it is not something that is not within us, but we do need to be able to use things like contemplative practices, things like opening up our minds to understand how best we can cultivate compassion as a skill in order to move forward and take that understanding to others in the world, and hopefully be able to transcend our in-group biases and extend them to our out-group. And most of all, as you can tell, I am very passionate about peace in the world, but that is ultimately the goal. And even aside from that, if you're just an educator here thinking about how best to nurture the people, that the brilliant young minds that you have connection to, these are wonderful tools to not only, as I said earlier, build up on self-esteem but self-confidence as students step out into the world and really be able to understand themselves and others in context to what is going on. So that is my big pledge to everyone here, to understand the powerful tools that compassion can bring. And I will be putting this information into the chat. If you'd like to take a screenshot of it, please do go ahead. But as Lucy mentioned, we do a lot of work at the Charter with different sectors. Education is a key sector that we work in, and we truly believe in facilitating and supporting compassionate communities all over the world. You can read more about our work at our website. And I would also like to add, just as a final piece, that although the Charter for Compassion is dedicated to promoting effective compassionate action through all of our initiatives and programs, what's really at the heart of the Charter is something that I know comes up in a lot of educator circles, and that is the Golden Rule. And one of our partners, which is the Golden Ruleism organization, has, I would say, not rewritten, but given the golden rule, which is do unto others as you would unto yourself, a deeper understanding of the two principal principles, as they call it. And I would love to read them out, because I think it is a really wonderful way to not just cap everything that we've said here, but a great thought to leave us with as we continue into the rest of this conference and we think of the different educators that we are crossing paths with. So, and I quote, do for all others, both directly and indirectly, what you would want done for you. Don't do to any others, either directly or indirectly, what you wouldn't want done to you. And with that, I would like to wrap up this space with all of you. Thank you so much for the wonderful comments in the chat. And to anybody who will be watching this later, I will be posting the contact details that are up here, as well as some of the other resources into the chat. So we would love to hear from you. And as a parting thought, again, I would love to extend my deepest gratitude to Lucy and the entire team, and just really take a moment to send deep love and gratitude to all the educators in the world, because this is probably one of the hardest jobs to do. And it is truly wonderful to be able to be in your presence and learn from all of your wonderful learning. So thank you so much.
What a wonderful presentation, Anum. I'm so grateful for you being here. And I'm so glad I've had the opportunity to get to know you online as a team for the Charter for Compassion, but also in person. And I'm wondering, can you tell people a little bit about what we did with the summit? I think that would be very interesting to people. And what are some things, how can youth get involved with your work and the Charter? How can they potentially join your leadership team? How are you looking to grow that program over the next year?
Yeah, thank you so much, Lucy. It's definitely been a wonderful ride, I think, getting to work together during the Charter and really being able to promote all the great work that we do. But quick few thoughts on what Lucy just mentioned. So we attended a summit in Mexico a little earlier. I'd actually not a little earlier. It's just so much has happened that it seems a little earlier. It was only 2 months ago. We attended the World Summit for Nobel Peace Laureates in Monterrey in Mexico, and there was a massive youth program that was taking place and does take place every time they host this summit. And we had the chance of participating in that as well as moderating a few panels. And it was wonderful to be able to see this youth delegation from all over the world, particularly young students in high school and also at the university level. And there were a number of topics that they discussed. And I think what was most inspiring to see was the way they connected with, I believe there were around 14 Nobel laureates who were present, and really to see their inspiration in terms of wanting to take forward a career in peace leadership. That was a very inspiring point for us at the Charter. And I think it was one of the key areas that we built up on when we hosted our global youth conference, which I made mention to, which took place exactly a month ago. And it was so fantastic to be able to invite some of the youth that we met at the summit to the Global Youth Conference. And just to answer your question specifically, Lucy, there are a number of different youth initiatives that we have at the Charter. We host primarily webinars and panels and all of our initiatives online, but we are in the process of tweaking out some plans for in-person events and programs next year. So connect with us on our LinkedIn page, which is the Global Youth Network on LinkedIn. You can email me directly. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter, which is on the Charter for Compassion website, because that always has a ton of information on what is happening. But some of the programs that we have in line for next year is a program that we are working on launching soon is the Global Youth Ambassadorship Program. We will be rolling this out in the first half of 2025. We are also in talks with different IB schools I know we might have some IB educators here. I did the IB myself, and I know how challenging it can be, which is why this came from a very special place of trying to host a volunteer internship program that would contribute to CAS hours. So we are in talks for that. And of course, as always, we have a number of webinars lined up, different panels, and we'd love for you to have a look at the Charter for Compassion Global Youth Conference. Much like this conference, we used Ring Central events, and all of the recordings are up on our YouTube playlist. And there's just so many different youth to connect with that really brought to light the different initiatives that they're running in their communities. And the theme that we focused on was youth for compassionate advocacy in action. So as you can imagine, there was a lot of talk of what I just did, but with younger people in the world really making strides in their community. So I think the best way to stay in touch is joining our LinkedIn page, signing up for the newsletter. And of course, you can see my email. I'm always welcome to setting up a Zoom chat with anyone all over the world. So please email me directly if you'd like to learn more. And I'd be very happy to post links to our, oh, and I can see they've already been posted. Thank you so much, Lucy, for doing that. And sorry, Lucy, did I miss answering any of your
questions? That was great. I think the other, I just posted the LinkedIn group that you have too for youth into the chat. I did have another question and I can't remember what it was, but EdNet Forum. So what I'm doing for the Charter is helping with their education initiatives, which go hand in hand with the youth initiatives. So we do monthly forums where we're highlighting education organizations that are doing related work. And so I think Pro-Social is coming up as the next highlighted, and there are a few others that we've done, and those recordings are also up on our YouTube channel. If you represent an organization that would like to be part of that, we'd love to have you. We usually do them on the third Thursday of the month. It's an hour and a half conversation and presentation kind of scenario. And we're always looking for new partners and that sort of thing. There are lots of resources on the Charter's website, including a map of co-creators, which includes organizations from across different sectors. Not only does the charter work in education, but in government, healthcare, business, you name it. There's always a lot going on. So make sure that you sign up for the newsletter, and hopefully you'll get to meet our executive director sometime during the conference. Her name is Marilyn Turkovich. She ran my student teaching program years ago, which will embarrass her if she hears that. But she is located near Seattle, and as you know, as many in the U.S. know, there was a big storm there, and a lot of people are without power there right now. So Marilyn should be floating around here if she gets power. But we're thinking of her in Washington State right now, and everybody else who's been affected by that. Anum, anything else you want to say before we stop broadcasting and move on to the next sessions?
Just a big thank you to anybody who was listening in the audience and to who watches this recording later. And again, Lucy, we can't thank you enough for pulling off a tremendous show. I have to say, with over 100 presentations, it is wild. And I really think that we must applaud your efforts any chance we get for creating this space from us, because truly it's been so inspirational to learn. And I'm really looking forward to all of the presentations today. And I was very excited to be the first keynote of the day.
Well, you were the right person to kick off the day for us here in the United States. So thank you. I appreciate it. So everyone, we have more sessions starting at the top of the hour. We're going to stop broadcasting, but we'll see you in the conference platform at the top of the hour. And thank you, Anum. I'm so glad to have met you and know you. And it's an honor to have you here at the conference. So we'll see you next time, everyone. And thanks for coming.